Hello. I'm going to get right into it today because I don't want this video to be super long, but as I'm thinking about it, there's probably no way that I'm going to be able to do this. I have a big stack of 808 State records. I thought about dividing up the albums, but I just don't think interest would be there. So anyway, I'm going to give as informative but as brief an overview of one of my favorite electronic groups of all time because these guys definitely deserve their own video, in my opinion. So as I was going through my mystery box of records a few weeks ago, I stumbled upon my 808 State collection, and yeah, I'm talking about it because I absolutely adore this group. They're kind of a hard group for newbies to get into because there's so many different versions of their songs and albums, and they had members that came and went, and I'll try to simplify that for anybody who might just be getting into 808 State. Those of you who are already into 808 State and you've been into them for 35 years, like I have, this will be old hat to you. But I want to make this interesting for both the old fans and possibly any new fans. This, for me personally, this was the start of 808 State for me. They had a single that came out before this, and I'll get into that in a minute. But this is their first album, New Build. Those of you who are into acid house, acid anything, if you're just getting into that whole sound somehow, those of you who were around when the rave scene was popping up and acid house was a new thing, you know this record, obviously. This is one of the centerpieces of that entire movement right here, New Build. And this is the release on Reflex. Richard D. James, aka Aphex Twin, loved 808 State. It was one of his biggest influences. And I want to say this came out in 1998, 99. He re-released New Build. This original release came out on a single record. Richard James repressed this onto 3 records. This is a triple pack. And that was a great idea because these tracks need to stretch out and breathe as much as possible. Here's the gatefold sleeve. The original version of this was just on a single record. So this was like a deluxe issue that Richard D. James was kind enough to give the world. I'll show you one of the labels. Again, I don't want to take up a lot of time with this video. All 3 of the records have labels like this, so I'm not going to show them all. This is a seminal fucking release. If you are in, forget about just acid house. If you're into electronic dance music and you're into it, you know, in the way that you're into electronic music of the last 35 years, particularly the 90s, which in my opinion is the greatest decade for electronic music. This is one of the prototype records. This is why people like Aphex Twin and artists like that started making music. This is one of the stone cold classics of the entire movement, New Build. A lot of people, I think, might think it sounds dated, and it probably does to a lot of people. But if you were there listening to this when it was new, this shook your world, man. This rattled you to your core. When I first heard this in 1989, I guess, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, my whole life changed. This is one of those life-changing records, man. This is one of the most influential dance records, acid house records, techno records, whatever records of the electronic genre that has ever been produced. So if you don't know this record, you'll get it. Get the Reflex one. If you're into vinyl, I don't know, you could probably go buy the CD or download this thing. I don't know. But if you're looking for the wax, go get the Reflex version because that's the one you want. This is one of my favorite records, y'all. Absolutely. Top 50 for sure. I know I always say this is one of my favorites, and most of the stuff I talk about on here are my favorites, but this is one of those Mount Rushmore favorites. This was absolutely life-changing for me, New Build. And the fact that Richard James spread out all the tracks onto 3 records is just a thing of beauty, man. On the right system, this stuff is amazing. And when this got re-released 10 years after its initial release, I did play this in the clubs and people loved it. So it's, while it does sound dated, it still sounds timeless, if that makes sense. It's dated and timeless all at the same time. It's just it's a record of its moment, of its time, and that time was exceedingly, extremely special. Hope that makes sense. I'm going to show this really quick. Richard James released this on Reflex as well. This is pre-build. This is a double record there. You get 2 records in here. And this is basically, he put out a bunch of, Richard James put out a bunch of pre-new build stuff. Early 808 state, the earliest 808 state. This is stuff that Gerald was on. And Gerald is on, I'm talking about Gerald Simpson, of course, and I'll talk about him briefly in this video because you have to if you're talking about 808 state. This is 808 state with Gerald Simpson part of the group. And this has live songs and early demos and mixes, and it's awesome. Some of the sound quality here is not fantastic, but you know, it's early demos and stuff like that. It's bound to not sound good, but it's still worth having. If you're into new build, you want pre-build too. I think it's absolutely essential that you have that. Here's another, I'm going to show all the Reflex reissues. Richard James released Quadrastate. This is a reissue. This original issue came out in the late 80s. It was right after New Build that this came out. And basically, Richard James put out the album on double vinyl, and he also put Let Yourself Go, which is the first 808 state single. Let Yourself Go. And he's got a couple of mixes of it there. So he basically just packaged that Quadrastate, the original track listing, with Let Yourself Go at the end, which is a great choice. And again, this is a good pressing. This is the Aphex Twin reissue on Reflex, and I think he put this out in 2004 or something. 2008. Okay, so he put this out like a decade after his new build reissue. You need this, man. And this is, if you want it on wax, go get the Reflex ones because they're just better. Quadrastate, early 808 state, early acid house, early genius, early electronic dance, rave era acid genius. Quadrastate. Just check it out. And I'll link some of these songs in the video, so if you're new to all this, you'll at least, I'll give you a small pathway into this stuff. So this is 90. This is their, I mean, this is an album. It's not very long. This is, I guess, essentially their second album in the UK. It's a very brief album. It's not very long. Oh. My copy here is a promo. I never even noticed that. There you go. I have a promo copy of this. This is the UK issue. I'll show the inner sleeve here. You get an eclipse and a fish. And I don't know if I want to show all labels for all these records, but there's a label for that. I think this version is worth getting because this ended up getting released in the United States. I'm going to sit here for 20 minutes and try to put this back in its sleeve, as I always do. This got released in the United States. It had a new cover. It had new track listings. It had some new versions. So I think they're both worth picking up. And I'll show that US edition here in a minute, in a second. I would recommend picking up both of these because they both have different versions and sequencing, different tracks, different mixes. They're both worth having. For instance, you get the original, like the original version of Pacific, their greatest song in my opinion, on this, on 90. And then here's the US edition. You get a pink version, it's called United State 90. This is basically, here, sorry, I know I'm shuffling around a lot here. I only have 2 hands and I want to show you guys things. Here's the US edition, the UK edition. This is basically a repackaging of this for the US market. So you get some extra tracks here, but there are also songs on here that are not on here. but you get more music here than you get here. You get different versions. Listen, they're both worth having. I highly recommend picking up both of these. You can't go if you can only get one. I mean, you can't lose. But I would recommend picking up both of them. It's fun and interesting to kind of hear what was going on in the UK version versus what they were trying to push here in the United States. Us fans, I mean, we had to have both of them because 808 State was awesome. They still are awesome. Pick them both up though if you can. And here's the Holy Grail. This is absolutely one of my favorite records of all time. I could do a video on this record alone. This is the Pacific 12-inch. This is the US edition on Tommy Boy Records. This is absolutely a top 10 record for me. If I were to eradicate all of the thousands of records in my collection and I could only keep 10, if someone said you only get to keep 10 physical records, this would be one of them. This is one of my favorite songs of all time. Every time I listen to this, it's hard to I can't describe it in words. I'm better with writing things. I probably could write out how this makes me feel, but my verbalizations fail me when I'm trying to think of the words that, where this song takes me and the space it puts me. I love this song. It's just one of the greatest songs ever written, in my opinion. And I also think it might have been written by Gerald. Gerald claims that this song was written by him. Gerald had left the band at this point, and this got credited to Graham Massey and the rest of the guys, but Gerald seems to think this is his track. I don't know. Does anyone know about this? I remember reading something somewhere about how Gerald claims that he wrote this song and was never given the proper credit. Anyway, this US edition is the best version, in my opinion, because it has the Justin Strauss remixes. And I'm going to do a video at some point on Justin Strauss. I think he's one of those unsung heroes when it comes to remixing. He's one of the greatest remixers of all time, I think. Justin Strauss. If you bought dance records here in the United States in the 80s, you're bound to have some records with Justin Strauss's name on them. He just remixed everything. And for the most part, his remixes were always good. And what he does here is stunning, because the original version of Pacific was so beautiful, but then Justin Strauss stepped in and he made it better. To me, that is such a hard thing to pull off, to take something that's genius anyway and then make it better. It's so rare. It's so rare. It just doesn't really happen. And Justin Strauss did that. The Strauss remixes are some of the greatest remixes I've ever heard in my life. Justin Strauss remixes of Pacific. If you're going to get Pacific, get any version you can get. But if you only get one, get the US version. The US 12-inch of this on Tommy Boy, oh my God, one of the best records of all time. I'm holding this up just as a curiosity piece. They reissued Pacific and Cubic, and I'll talk about that in a second here. Back in '98, basically has some remixes. I think John Carter does a remix on here. These are pretty good. Anyway, I hold that up as a curiosity piece. Here's Cubic. This is the US edition of Cubic. Again, I feel like even if you're not a 808 State fan, if you have any passing interest in dance music, I feel like you've probably heard this. I think here in the United States, at least, this might be the most well-known 808 State track, and maybe it is in the UK as well. You British people tell me, is Cubic 808 State's most common song, the song everybody knows? I think that's the case here in the United States, and for good reason. It's a great song. It encapsulates that early rave scene very well. It was a rave anthem across the earth. It's just one of the best rave songs ever, Cubic. And 808 State didn't always just make rave music. They varied their sound very much. But Cubic is 808 State in full-on rave mode. And it's a good song. This is like a US promo with different remixes on Tommy Boy. This is 2 promo-only mixes that are definitely worth picking up. This is XL. And I think they reissued this recently. on double wax. I read some not so great reviews about the reissues. I can understand that. Most reissues just aren't done very well. I'd say 95% of them just aren't done well. I would say 90% of all pressings, period, are not done very well these days. This is a great record, and this is the original UK double pack. It came out on 2 records here. And this is the way to hear this, because this did get reissued. It just got issued in the United States and the UK, but it was all on 1 record. And this album is like an hour long. And so when you have an hour of music, you want to have it on 2 records, man. If you cram that all onto 1 record, it just doesn't sound good. In the UK, they were wise enough to have a limited edition where they pressed it on 2 records. And this is that original UK issue from 1991 on 2 pieces of wax, and that's the way to hear this, I think. Check this out. This, for all intents and purposes, this was their 3rd album after New Build in 90 or United State, whatever you want to call it. And this is good stuff, man. This came out in 1991, I want to say, right? 1991. Please tell me I have that right. Yes, 1991. And it's a great album. It's a great album. Just check this out. Anything. Any early stuff. I can't say I'm a huge fan of later 808 State, and I'm not going to talk about later 808 State. I am going to be stopping this video up until a point, which is basically now, the early 90s. This is Oops. Tommy Boy, U.S. edition. They did this single with Bjork. Before Bjork was Bjork, when she was just one of the Sugar Cubes, she was lending her vocals to groups like 808 State. And this came out in 91, so this was prior to her first album. You know, Bjork was way into this stuff. I mean, she brought Graham Massey on board to do plenty of remixes and productions, especially for her second album, Post. Graham Massey is all over that record, all over the singles that got released from that record. She has a huge amount of respect for Graham Massey, as she should. And they both first collaborated right here on Oops. Not my favorite. Not my favorite 808 State moment. 808 State has plenty of stuff that I don't really like. This is one of those moments. I mean, it's all right, but... And again, I'm gonna keep it there. I want to keep this video, try to keep this video under 20 minutes. I want to just give people a general guide of 808 State and kind of let them go discover it on their own. And quite frankly, I'm not a huge 808 State fan post XL. I'm just not. I think the stuff they did is interesting, but I'm not a huge fan of it, and quite frankly, I haven't listened to it a lot. So I don't feel like I have a ton to say about it. So I'm going to keep this video to the early stuff. I am going to hold this up. This is another Reflex issue. Richard James put this out. Graham Massey basically remixed a couple of New Order tracks. He does Blue Monday and Confusion. It's basically New Order getting the 808 State treatment. New Order was there listening to 808 State. They're all from Manchester. They have that connection. And I'm showing this as a curiosity piece. As you'll see, Reflex, Aphex Twin, right here, man. Aphex Twin, huge 808 State fan. And these are cool remixes, man. Arguably the best. Graham Massey just gives them the old acid house treatment. Now, as I said before, when you talk about 808 State, you have to talk about A Guy Called Gerald. And I'm going to show this because it needs to be shown. This is Voodoo Ray. Do I have to explain what this record is? I really don't want to explain this. If you don't know this, go check it out. There might not be a more iconic, central, pivotal track to the entire acid house scene. Am I incorrect here, people? If you would disagree with me, let me know. But I think there is an argument to be made that this is the acid house track. Why do I say that? Because I was fucking there, man. You could not go to a rave or any kind of club without hearing this track in the late 80s, early 90s. It was always played. People always freaked out when it played, and it's a brilliant song. And this is A Guy Called Gerald. This is Gerald Simpson. He's the guy I was talking about in regard to the Pacific single. Gerald seems to think he wrote Pacific, but he didn't get credited for it. It wouldn't surprise me. Gerald Simpson is just one of those Mount Rushmore producers. He started a whole scene, okay? One of the most important musical scenes of the last half century. This guy's got the most important track surrounding that scene. If you don't know Voodoo Ray, I would be shocked. I'm not even gonna link. Here I am trying to get this back in its sleeve. I'm not even gonna send a link to Voodoo Ray. Go look it up, man. You need to know this song. If you don't know this song, for God's sakes, where have you been? And I'm going to show these as curiosity pieces. This is the first Gerald album, Hot Lemonade. I don't think this came out in the United States. I think this is a UK European release only. And this initial copy did not have Voodoo Ray on it. Voodoo Ray was a single only. And I have I have the original UK Voodoo Ray 12-inch. I don't know where it is. It's stuffed away in my archive somewhere. I did look for it for the purposes of this video, and I couldn't find it. But check it out if you can. It's basically just got a picture of Gerald on the cover. I think he's got a hat on. He's just chilling. But back then, singles didn't always necessarily pop up on the albums. In fact, it was more often back in the 80s that did not happen. I mean, think about it. New Order did it a lot. The Smiths did it a lot. They would put out 12-inch only tracks. And then they put out the album that had other tracks. And Gerald did that here. And then this is a US issue of Automatic, the second Gerald album. I wanted to show these albums in particular because these albums, if you're an 808 State fan, if you're an Acid House fan, if you're a fan of that acid sound from the late 80s, early 90s, these are the records you want to pick up. Gerald has other records like Black Secret Technology that came out, I want to say 95, 96-ish, which is brilliant. He went in an entirely new direction for that record. He basically just dropped his drum and bass and jungle stuff with that record. Brilliant record, but I'm not going to talk about that for this video. I want to keep it Acid House related. And I think this is an essential purchase. I think all of these are. But really, check this out. Check all this stuff out, really. But as I look at all this stuff, I mean, if I were to pick one 808 State record, it would be Pacific, obviously. But if you're looking for a place to start, I can't recommend here enough. Pacific and New Build. If you're just somehow getting into this crazy, wacky acid house stuff, I mean, good God. This is one of the best, one of the most essential records you can have in your collection if you're a dance music fan. Forget about acid. Dance music fans, you need this and you need Pacific, all right? 808 State. Check them out. Until next time, bye.